Ayanis will be a place that is, I think, one of the most holy in the world in the future. A place of pilgrimage and a place of wonder and a place of uncovering great aspects of our story. They're all over the place. And yet I say to myself, and I look at that and I say, that's evidence of a lost civilization. Someday in the future, those will be the things that we're looking for. If you take the cuneiform and you take it out of the equation, you realize that maybe this civilization left no writings behind because language wasn't even a thing for them. Maybe their language was symbolism and deep esoteric meanings.
Way of Will John.
Welcome back, my friends. What is going on? This is, as always, one of our great guests is back. And as you know, I'm very, very happy always to be speaking with my good friend, Matt LaCroix. Matt, what's going on, man?
Hey, Will, I love these conversations. We've had so many good ones over the years, and you've been such a supporter of everything that I'm doing and the team is doing, and I know you've been following along. So this is so cool that you get to be the first place that I can basically unveil everything that happened on the latest trip of filming, and I haven't done that yet. So this is the first place that's going to happen, and I'm excited to share that with you, Will.
As always, and also because, as those of you that don't know, if you're new to the channel, my discovery of Matt years ago happened because I was binging all of Matt's work. And to see how far you've come also is an incredible thing. And, that's what we're going to get into because it's been awesome to see. And I know it's just the beginning of all of this stuff. And you've been working on a large project for a very long time. And just like you said, there's a bit of things that you can convey and some new stuff as always, because I know how this moves with you. And now, especially with you going out, taking these trips, doing everything. So we've got a lot to show, which is amazing. Cause I love these video podcasts where you're able to kind of break down what you find, what you saw and stuff like that. So give everybody, let's get a kind of a roundup, a summary of what the goal has been, what has been found, what's going, and then we'll touch on what you just discovered and where you're at now.
Yeah, to talk about this being a project that has had challenges, it's had huge longevity of building and having to plan is an understatement. It's been a year and a half of basically solid planning, organizing. Originally we were going to do the filming we just did in Turkey a year ago, but because of permits and the nature of everything, it wasn't meant to happen then, and it didn't. And because of that, since then, we've of course have grown so much as a team, but also on the connections and the people we're working with and the sites and the revelations that we've come across. Of course, like, my good friend Martin Young always says, I truly believe in things being divinely timed. And these could not be better examples of that. Again, in its infancy, this project had so many questions. It had so much wondering of whether or not it was going to succeed and where it was going to go and who was going to be part of it. And now that we are just coming back from a very successful filming trip in Turkey, which is of course the heart of the documentary, it has many other places. We already filmed in Peru and Bolivia. We filmed in Turkey, and then we filmed in the Penn archives of Penn University in Pennsylvania in the United States. It's been such a journey to get to this point and have things succeed in the way that they have. I was telling people on the trip, just this past 10 days we spent in Turkey, that I think it was probably the best 10 days of my life. It changed me on such a deep level, and the experiences, the diving, what we uncovered together, and also just the experiences of the archaeologists that ended up being a part of it, and even the mayor of one of the towns, and having just everyone come out and work together was really quite a beautiful set of experiences.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the evolution has been wild, and we'll link to some of our other discussions that are maybe even at the beginning of this journey, somewhat, so guys can check them out. I mean, it'll be quite a binge session for everybody because it's exciting. I mean, each stage has been this crazy evolution, and so to kick it off, I think we're going to start in Lake Vaughn, if I'm remembering right. And so we've got some images, we've got some stuff that you have sent over, and so we're going to throw those up so you guys can kind of follow along. And then just put us in that world. Give us that story and kind of what you discovered, and we'll go from there.
So this is an area of Lake Vaughan that it's very remote. So the picture we're showing right now, we wanted to show the most beautiful parts of Lake Vaughan because it is such a tremendously beautiful and unknown place, unspoiled. It really is like wilderness still. And we got a chance to go out and experience these different areas of it. And what we want to do is bring people to the heart of this ancient region and not just show the ancient mysteries, but show just how incredible the journey and the beauty of this region is. And so here is Lake Vaughan. It is the 13th or 14th deepest lake in the world. It's enormous. However, there's an entire discussion point between fishermen and divers and the Coast Guard we had that it may actually be far deeper than even that. In fact, it could be on the level or just below Lake Baikal, making it one of the deepest lakes on Earth. So a very cool discussion we could have on that. But basically, the mysteries of things that are coming out of Lake Vaughan just continuously amaze me about what we're uncovering and finding. And again, I've never even met anybody that's even heard of Lake Vaughan. And so it feels like it's an uncharted wilderness of discovery and ancient places that could, I firmly believe, fundamentally change our understanding of ancient history and our origins.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the discussions we were having, just completely off camera, we were talking about some implications that if some of the stuff that you had discovered, if correct me if I'm wrong, some of the stuff that was being discovered or that you had discovered had implications on, was it the dating of some of the help me on this because I think that we were discussing Lake Vaughan, or maybe I'm mixing
Yes.
stuff up.
Yeah, so there's the area that we're going to be going to in terms of diving, which comes in early in this trip. It was really birthed out of a number of different areas of interest. Number one, of course, having the deepest confirmed underwater ruins in the world under Lake Vaughan to explore is enough of an enigma in itself. But what I have uncovered and I've explored a lot extensively, and you'll see in this, and we can talk about it, is Dr. Robert Schock and I went to the rim of one of the largest caldera volcanoes in the world called Mount Nemrut, which is right on the southwest part of Lake Vaughan. Absolutely incredible. And I'll send you an image of that so you can make sure you put that up. And we basically were exploring its geologic and climatologic catastrophe history. And one of the considerations there is whether or not it gives us the ability to potentially date the underwater ruins, because Lake Vaughan during Paleo times, during the pre-Holocene, pre-Ice Age, was far lower than it is now. Far lower, significantly lower, to the point where we have these underwater ruins just off of a town called the Giza in the northern part of the lake. And they're at a scattered depth, so they're not all at the exact same depth. Imagine an area of a stepped hillside that was once above water, and there are temples and structures and megalithic walls sort of throughout a whole area. So to be very clear, it's not one spot, it's covering an area of half a kilometer, quite significant in the area of these ruins. And so what we were exploring was not only exploring the ruins and the symbols, the stonework, some of the things that compare to above water, but the biggest thing that we were exploring is this relationship potentially between the eruption of Mount Nemrut in right around the Younger Dryas time period. And this is what's called the Pleistocene. It's basically the end of an Earth era that moves into a new era of the Holocene. And during this time period is just extreme volatility on the Earth. We've seen evidence of extreme plasma-like events, maybe impacts, but really the evidence has been showing extreme plasma-like events with earthquakes and volcanism and tsunamis and all of these disastrous events, geomagnetic excursions of the poles on the Earth. All of these things seem to be pointing towards an extremely volatile time period at the end of the Pleistocene, in which Lake Vaughan suddenly rose massively in its levels and water levels. Now, I want to point out a caveat to that.
Okay.
I truly revere Dr. Robert Schock in his objective analysis of this. And so the back and forth that we had, in of course a very friendly way, was going back and forth about how fast Lake Vaughan rose. Was it a gradual thing? Was it a quick and fast thing? what was the nature of that. And I'll give you a little bit of backstory for those who don't know, is that these underwater ruins are somewhere between, depending on the level they are, they're between 40 and 100 feet would have been the lake level that would have been lower. So they're at 40 to 85 feet deep. Okay, but in order for the lake to have those above water, the lake would have had to have been 100 feet lower than it is now. 100 feet. And how do you account for that? Well, typical rainfall patterns aren't going to do that unless
No.
you have some kind of a major geologic event. And that is exactly what I found that we are exploring. Is basically you find the Mount Nemrut, which I was just talking about being on the edge of that caldera. Absolutely just incredible experience standing on the edge of that volcano. But you look at the fact that that volcano exploded and blew its entire top off, something like 30 times Mount St. Helens or more, and basically destroyed the region. But most importantly, what it did is it blocked off the only river exit in the southwest part of the lake, called the 𝗪𝗟𝗡 River, blocking it off with a huge formation of land in front of it, sealing the lake to become the largest soda lake, the largest alkaline closed basin soda lake in the world, meaning that there's no large lake on the planet that has no outlet. And so
Okay.
that's what ended up happening to Lake Vaughan, is that this eruption blocked off the 𝗪𝗟𝗡 River, sealing it from having any outflow. It has rivers in the north and the east. And essentially, that was where I was like, my mind was blown, because I said to myself, here we have accurate dating of Mount Nemrut exploding at the end of the Pleistocene in the transition of the older and younger Dryas, right? In this catastrophic period in Earth. And you see these ruins just flood under 100 feet of water in some cases, 80 to 100 feet. To me, the only thing that had made sense was, of course, it's that bathtub analogy of blocking off the outlet, where all of a sudden that's what you could explain through raising water levels that significant. And that was what we were exploring for potential dating. Because if those ruins predated the eruption of Mount Nemrut with the water levels, and we could prove it, then it means that they're older than the eruption itself.
Give us the years. I mean, obviously you're talking about the Younger Dryas period in that Pleistocene, end of that Pleistocene period. Give us some firm numbers so people know.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have been after. We know the Younger Dryas catastrophes, which is what it's basically labeled as the end of the Pleistocene. That's the
Right.
scientific, basically, description of when it erupted. And that means it's somewhere between, say, 14,500 years ago and 11,800 years ago. It's just, that's the volatile time period. It's somewhere in that was the major eruption that led to that blocking of the 𝗪𝗟𝗡 River.
Okay. And did you get a chance, or do we know what these civilizations, what are these ruins like? Like, what does it tell us about those people? Who were they? What did they understand? Were they advanced? What do we know about them?
Well, it depends on which narrative you're following. It depends
Okay.
on which perspective you're looking at. Are you talking about the traditional archaeological perspective
I
that's
want
been
both.
laid down
I know. I
that's
know
been
where we're
laid
going.
down since perhaps like Charles Burney in the
Yeah.
1950s, who he's the godfather of laying out the foundation of what's called the Urartian culture. And of course, he's done excellent work in that area. However, I will strongly point out there have been what I would consider major challenges, major inaccuracies, major potentially significant antiquated information that was not accurately labeled and understood, because of the fact that it was trying to be looked at through the lens of the Urartian culture. So if we want to wrap our heads around and go down that ancient history timeline, imagine during the time period of the Proto-Akkadian into Assyrian civilizations, not Sumerian. I want to be super careful. Let's have a quick little Mesopotamian history lesson here for a second. If this is the timeline of ancient Mesopotamia, this is all the way up until the end of Babylon, okay, when they were conquered. More recent, right? 3.5 to 4,000 years ago. Here you have this mysterious civilization called the Sumerians, which is a big part of what we're exploring here.
Okay.
Then you have what are called the Akkadian, Proto and Akkadian civilizations that came after. This is about 6,500 to 6,000 years ago is the emergence of the Akkadian civilization with the city of Uruk and Kish with the famous hero Gilgamesh. Okay, so that's right in here. Then you get the Assyrian civilization right after that. That's more like 44,000 years ago or so. Okay,
Okay.
that leads all the way up into 3,000 years ago, the Assyrian civilization at its height, with the great kings and rulers of Sennacherib, Tigris, and of course, all the way into Ashurbanipal, who created the greatest library ever in history. So, in order to understand, then of course, Babylon is in there with Old and New Babylon. That time frame has a whole bunch of different civilizations that have come and gone in that.
Uh-huh.
But specifically during the Assyrian time period of about 3,000 years ago, more importantly, if you want to dial it in, about 2,800 years ago, you have the emergence of a culture that is, I believe, is a branch of either the Akkadians or Assyrians that move into the Lake Von region. They create a civilization and they become known as the Urartians or the Urartu. Okay? Urartu. They're an Iron Age culture that was very much in the midst of a war, of a world that was dominated by war. So the Assyrian civilizations were fighting these massive armies on horseback and bow and arrow. And you see those depictions in the murals at the Ashurbanipal Library. And so these huge battles were going on in this conquering of empires, right? It was called the Assyrian Empire that had come out of the Akkadian Empire. And they were very interested in targeting and attacking and fighting the Urartians. So they were constantly battling each other, okay? Imagine this time period of 2,800 years ago to 2,600 years ago. So you have 200, 250 years of war,
Yeah.
off and on war and conquering. And so it's no coincidence that the Urartians, in all of their artwork, their shields, their Iron Age tools, it's all war symbols. They were in the middle of fighting. But there's a huge problem here, Will. We see significant evidence that's mounting throughout the Lake Von region that the Urartians actually went to that area during about 2,800 years ago and found the remnants of a far more ancient civilization, one that had none of the same mentalities that it did and potentially predated it by well over 5,000 years, I will just say. Well over 5,000 years, to the point where they had actually very little in common other than the recollection, it seemed, of ancient stories, of potential origins and connections, but also of adopting what was there and bringing it into the might of their culture. And then also, very important note, trying to claim ownership of building certain things because of the fact that you're an empire that's in war. Everything is all about might and strength and being as strong, perceived as strong to your enemy as possible. And so to make that a long story short, when I ended up getting into this exploration of these civilizations out of my interest in the Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian time period in the story of, right, the Untapishtim Zayasudra Noah mythos story, it led me to here 2 years ago. And for 2 years, this has been an obsession of research, but also forming this documentary. And that, I guess, catches everybody up to basically just an understanding of what we're doing here in the Von region and what was, we can get into what was built around the lake.
That's perfect. And I think that gives everybody a better understanding of where we are in history. And so after the Lake Von, where did we go on our trip here? Where did that take us to?
Well, it took us underneath the lake.
Okay,
That was the
so we
first
went
thing.
underneath,
And
and you dove.
yeah, well, that's here we're showing it. This is the first light. This right here is about 4:15 or 4:30 in the morning. We had to get there very early because under the lake you have a lot of types of underwater microinvertebrates and things that can have high reflectivity. So you only have a certain amount of hours you can dive. So we had to rent, and we had the whole team together. This is only part of the team. These are most of the experts. So if you look, you can see, I can just name them so we can go over
Yeah.
this. But on the right, you have, of course, Paul Wallace, that you know very well. You have 𝗪𝗟𝗡𝗪𝗪 above him, who is one of the archaeologists at 𝗪𝗪𝗪, one of the sites literally right above where we are in this picture, up in the mountains. Behind him is our crew. We have Tom Lowry on camera. We have Mike, of course, on sound, and then we have Brandon Barnes, Mike Wilson, and Brandon Barnes as DP and cameraman. Love those guys. Shout out to them. They are awesome. What a team. And then in the back, you have Claudia Martin's wife, and you have Dr. Robert Schock's wife, Katie. And then as you move up, you have our drone operator, 𝗪𝗛. 𝗪𝗛 did an awesome job. I truly respect and appreciate 𝗪𝗛. And then Arturo Ponce de Leon there in the center. Then Dr. Robert Schoch. And then Lydia. Lydia was not in this picture, but she was there. Lydia de Leon. And then you have Martin Young. And then, of course, our fearless guide, Saba. Truly appreciate him as well. But this is only part of the team. We had a lot of other people with equipment and things that were dealing with the diving, with the underwater stuff, the diving, and also other aspects of the filming. So we had a group of about 20 people or
Wow.
even more. So it was quite huge.
Wild.
So we head out to explore this entire area of ruins. That what you're going to see in the pictures coming up is Tausen Jalen, who is the discoverer of the underwater ruins, which those were found in 2017. So if we're thinking, Will, about ancient discoveries, that is the newest thing in the
Yeah.
world. 2017 for something on this magnitude. And so most of the world hasn't seen it yet. And so what we were...
Can I interrupt?
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
before 2017, we didn't have any understanding that there were ruins underneath the
No.
water in Lake Vaughn.
Not only
We
that, but these became the deepest confirmed underwater ruins confirmed in the world. We can't confirm the Cuba ones yet. That's not enough data. So this became an anomaly, and you can see how far offshore it is. This is a great picture to show you. You're right below an area called Ajijavez in 𝗪𝗛𝗟𝗄. There's a Urartian castle on the hill there that is... you can see that this area has a lot of ancient ruins and ancient relics. And so, yes, 2017, before, we had no idea that these underwater ruins were here. And that's why we are truly pioneering to uncover and explore something pivotal to our history. I will admit here, Will, I was not going to dive. There's a lot of logistics involved with doing something like that.
I bet.
However, I did, and I am very thankful I did dive. And it was an experience that was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Was going down and touching the flower of life symbol and touching those sacred ruins underwater. It was definitely an experience I'll never forget. I was really proud of Dr. Robert Schoch. He dove twice.
Okay.
I was really proud of him for doing that, going down and exploring them together. But that was such a magical experience to see literally sunken underwater ruins that have been essentially lost to time.
What was the feeling there? Was it eerie at all? Like while you're down there? I mean, it's silent and quiet. Like what sort of vibe did you pick up?
It felt like being in a movie, which we were, but it felt like doing something that you've just watched on TV and always wanted to do. Like, wow, I can imagine diving down to underwater ruins, and especially ones that literally only a handful of people have ever even seen. I mean, Tausen Jalen is the one that took this picture. He's behind the camera. He was the one who discovered it in 2017, and since then they've only had, I think, like one or like a few dives, and no one from the academic world has even come out to show interest in this yet. Which subsequently it looks like that completely changed, and an entire organization of underwater archaeology may have been formed, partly to do with our trip there. We certainly have created a lot of noise, and I think it's in a good way because it's stimulating and creating that interest. But yeah, here we go. Like this moment right here, one of the greatest moments in my life, hands down.
What is it for scene?
Touch that ancient block. It was magical, Will.
What is this? You said the flower of life. Is that's the symbol we're seeing?
It's a 6-petaled or 6-spoked flower. Now, whether or not we want to say it's exactly the flower of life, but it's a very similar type of symbol to that. It looks like it's more of, if we see the comparisons to other sites of the passing of the pine cone, the seeding of the tree of knowledge, it looks like it's a flower of life symbol, but with these seeds of like a tree of life combining into a central symbol. And it has 6 spokes on it, which exactly match other artifacts like we've talked about, like on the 𝗪𝗛𝗛 bas-relief and even the altar at Ayanis. So there is a shared motif here that goes back to something we see around the world with this deep understanding, Will, of concepts that go far beyond even what modern society understands. I mean, these are just only kept within certain secret societies and esoteric mystic groups about the understanding of this kind of sacred geometry and what it means for that knowledge of the entire, potentially the entire understanding of the universe and Earth. It seems like there's a fractal nature of divine knowledge that was imparted on these structures. And what gets even more wild, Will, is that when you're first diving down, right, you take the leap and you whoosh, fall in the water, and then you're trying to breathe and you look underneath. And what you see is that this temple is a perfect circle, that these hewn blocks, and Robert Schock and I are going back over what kind of geology they might be. I believe that they're basalt, but that's a discussion we're having, is that they form a perfectly hewn circular structure. And I mean perfect. It's a beautiful circle from above. And on each end are these capstones with these sacred symbols on them. And so we were diving down to explore the structure, looking at the iconography of these symbols, like what they could mean. And while we were down there, we found a new one too. And we can of course talk about that.
Okay. Well, as you were continuing, you can flip through, Jalen, if we have a couple more photos. My question, and you know, this is one that I've always had, and you're one of the best people in the world to pose this question. But as you mentioned, the sacred geometry, and you guys having the discussions on what this could possibly mean, and the links between, other civilizations. Do you get the sense? I mean, it's pure speculation, and so you may not know enough, but you can connect the dots where you want. I'm always fascinated with the idea of how embedded and how entrenched this, what is now esoteric knowledge, may not have been esoteric knowledge, meaning not hidden, not occult in other civilizations, whereas they might have had the ability to incorporate this as just a normal thing, right? I mean, we can all imagine a world in which we could live in right now where it's not a cult, where you're not at the beginning of your career, you're not a fringe researcher. It's just another thing that we all take that is just normal. And so, do you get the sense, or could you have any sense of how well embedded and how entrenched this is? Because if this is a temple, if you guys are right, of course, you know that this is a temple, that's a place of worship. And places of worship, in modern day, don't necessarily represent the secular world in the modern, modern society. So do you get the sense that this is a society, if they're at war all the time, is this a society that's also with a well understanding of the spiritual nature of the world, or is this just an offshoot and it's a temple you found?
I like that question a lot, and actually it leads right into the observations we had. And so I want to point out that there are differences of opinions based on whether or not this is, of course, Urartian or it's something pre-Urartian. And so according to archaeologists, they call this what's called a bastion. A bastion is a type of fortification, type of castle structure. And I bring up, and I was, of course, in those conversations, and I won't mention who they are. But in those conversations, I simply said, okay, guys, if this is a bastion, why do we have sacred geometry symbols on it? Why would you ever put sacred geometry symbols on a military fortification? And they're sort of like, I don't know. And so I come back, and this is where the discussions come out as say, well, if we want to understand what something was or what it functioned was as, we just simply need to understand the nature of the symbols that were left behind, what they mean. And then, of course, that gives us an understanding of why maybe the structure was created and what it represented. So we see sacred geometry components here. And I can break these symbols down. The one in the center is very flower of life-like, we'll say. But it tends to lean on a motif we see around these other sites above water of, again, the seeding in the tree of life. Seeding the tree of life, and that they're like seeds that are blossoming and growing. Now, what's really wild, and this is going to tie into this maybe, is that symbol on there, Will, when you say it looks very flower-like, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
sacred geometry flower-like.
Yeah.
Well, the fascinating thing is that the name Ayanis, which I think is connected to all these sites, is the most important one in my opinion. The name itself means sacred or holy flower. Okay? And it gets down deeper and deeper, because what you start to see is a relationship between these symbols, these structures, and then others all around it. So right above this is a place called 𝗃𝗪𝗟𝗄, which is an ancient mountain temple that literally looks up above and looks down at this spot. So if you were up at 𝗃𝗪𝗟𝗄, sitting in this ancient temple, looking over the vastness of Lake Van, you would look down and these ruins would be on the shoreline on the edge of the lake right below you. And so if we think about masculine and energy for a moment, because everything comes down to these core aspects of natural law in the universe. And one of them is polarity, these concepts of polarity, duality, the masculine and feminine component here. 𝗃𝗪𝗟𝗄 is up on a mountain. It uses coarse basalt stone, a very masculine energy. Whereas down here, everything is circular. So all the blocks are square up above on 𝗃𝗪𝗟𝗄, right? Very masculine. And then down here, we have this beautiful circular temple with symbols that are just radiating forms of circles and flowers of life. Everything is within circles. And that was where I realized that there was a really interesting relationship going on between every single one of these temples. And in every single example, Will, there was never anything shown that had war symbols, swords or shields or spears. But I will point out that, and I feel like this was an unfortunate thing that occurred in history with Charles Burney, was that these depictions of passing the pine cone to the tree of life were mistaken as being spears.
Okay.
Because the lens of a warlike Urartian culture, all of the symbols were then trying to be looked through the lens of that culture. So how does this make sense for the Urartians? Well, the T-pillars we saw at Cavuştepe, they must be windows in a castle. And this must be a bastion for a fortification on the edge of the shoreline. And everything else were castles for, for keeping people safe because of the times of war. But we see no evidence of war in any of these places. If anything, Will, to answer your question, it seems as though this mysterious ancient echo of our past, this grand, incredible civilization, knew the greatest aspects of esoteric, hermeticism, sacred geometry, phi ratio, mathematic ratios of creation, like Nikola Tesla understood. They understood all of it to the deepest possible level. And that was exactly what they left behind, was the greatest understanding of that knowledge of everything before they disappeared. And so to find that and have a breadcrumb trail, like a scavenger hunt, of not only piecing together this ancient culture, Will, but piecing together the lost story of us to understand who we are from the breadcrumbs that they left behind so that we would never forget.
Right. Yeah. And I love the fact that that is what your search is. I mean, that's a lot of what, you've been one of my favorite people to try and make sense of ancient history and the entire understanding that we don't have the full picture. We do not have the full picture, or at least the traditional modern story of our history, of human history, that's portrayed to us in school, was portrayed to us as fixed, understood, without gaps. I really got a sense growing up that we knew and that there weren't really discoveries being done. I mean, how naive and we can get into whether or not that's presented to us as on purpose or if it's just kind of an accident. But when you go now, as you go, and the next place you went, correct me if I'm wrong, was Cavuştepe on the trip. What did you find there? What was the next piece of the puzzle that you put together?
Yeah, Cavuştepe has always been a very enigmatic and mysterious place. It has a complex history. So it has both the sacred nature of things that once were, but there's also conflict there. There's war. Battles have been fought here. People have lost their lives here. It is a place of energy from many different kinds of areas. And so people, when they visit here, if they're sensitive, they often say that. They notice that it's a complex place. And it is. It's a complex history of extensive reuse and recycling by not only the Urartians, but even different time periods within the Urartians. And so it's definitely complicated in that way. But we found some really pivotal things that I think crack open this. So in this image right here, you can see what is a 5-foot long giant T-like pillar, right? T is obviously our concept, but it is one of my favorite ancient artifacts in the world. Back when I first went here, I ran over to this area because I knew there was at least one or two, only to find that there were 7.
Mhm.
And of course, there are some others in a few other places. But to give you an understanding, that T that we're looking at, that pillar, that artifact, is 5 feet long with 2 feet across the top, weighs somewhere between 4 and 7 tons. Absolutely massive. And inside is a square that's perfectly cut, beautifully cut out of this basalt, which, by the way, is one of the hardest stones on Earth.
Yeah.
And what Robert Schoch is finding out right in that picture is that it is exactly 12 inches across the width of the middle of that. And when we started looking at where Arturo was talking and Robert Edward Grant was talking about, we have some of the core principles of mathematics right here in this structure, meaning that they understood aspects of key components of the mathematical sacred geometry component long before they were ever supposed to. And of course, we know Pythagoras and how he got most of his information from Babylon. But again, if we're looking at a civilization here that predated Babylon, could this be the origins of literally everything? Mathematics. Could this be the origins of agriculture emerging out of the Sumerians into this region after a catastrophe? Is this the emergence of astrology, astronomy? Is this the emergence of mathematics as we know it through a 60-based system? Different. And the fact that what we're looking at here, and I'm not a mathematics expert, Robert Grant could talk about that a lot more than I could, but what we're finding were constants within that structure that clearly point towards something far different and older than we're told through the traditional Urartian time period. In fact, we still have no idea how that artifact was even utilized in the temple or whatever structure it was. It's completely a mystery.
And we don't have any understanding. I mean, come on. I mean, some of the places and images from your trips and some of these things, the construction of them is otherworldly. These things weigh so much. I mean, and I know we're supposed to just understand that they pulled these things together with levers and manpower and all this, and I've eaten that up. I have no reason not to. I'm not an engineer, an architect. I don't know, right? But it just, you look at them and you're just like, well, why can't you guys do it? Why can't you do it with, you know what I mean? Like, well, okay, well, if that was so easy for them, why can't you do it? And there's not a solid answer. And so I know there's not much to be said because you didn't excavate. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was no excavation. You guys didn't do any sort of digging or any sort of stuff like that, did you?
We did at 𝗪𝗪𝗪, though.
Oh, you did a Kefkowski. Okay, so you did get to do some excavation because I'm always wondering about daily life tools, what else you can find and have an understanding for how they live. I mean, what is this that you're holding here? Is this still in Cavuştepe?
Yeah, this is a great shot to talk actually about. So that
All
is
right.
a piece of cut basalt with a polished edge that is so smooth, Will, that it looks like it was created yesterday.
Right.
Now, why are we holding this? Well, Cavuştepe, again, complex history. We are shown there's a lower temple called,
Mhm.
well, the Temple of Hiroshima, which is Hiroshima is basically is like a fertility god, and then there's an upper temple for holiday. There's usually always 2. Now, the lower temple has some of the most beautiful masonry. So if you just look up the name Cavuştepe, you can find some really great photographs of it. It's the beautiful, well-known, I'll tell you when you get to it, beautiful, well-known, that's all the Adobe Urartian work. Yeah, on the left side there, middle, there you go. So this is what's called the Lower Susi Temple. Now, this is one of the finest masonry ancient structures, bar none, in the world. And I have some great photographs. They may not have made it over to you, but we can use these for now. So
Sure.
in that, you can see limestone work underneath and around just spectacular basalt stonework. And I mean spectacular.
Zoom in, Jalen.
You
Please.
walk up to that and put your hand on it. It
Uh-huh.
is the smoothest thing you've ever felt. It is, the edges are so sharp that they literally could cut your finger if you put it across it too much. They're spectacular. They're absolutely amazing. And that structure right there is being told to us to have been built at the same time. And what we're going to be pointing towards, we get back to that photograph I showed you before, after I explain this, is that Yeah, but go back to the other one first, and we'll get to this one in a minute. This spot, we've been told, is built by the Urartians, but there's a lot of problems. Number one, basalt, this type of igneous type of volcanic stone, is not native anywhere to this area. In fact, the whole mountain is only limestone. So that lighter stone that's sort of like a brownish lighter color is what's native underneath the ground.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they were finishing and fixing a structure with that limestone that's very crudely placed all around it. And archaeologists are telling us that that was built at the same time period by the same people. And yet there's this massive disconnect and mismatch between stonework and quality and then this other primitive work. And of course, I have always been under the impression that because the lower level and the entranceway is sunken, you can clearly see that they had to prop it all up and basically re-put it back together. And that theory has been one that I've had for a long time. But archaeologists will point out, and this is a theme that we're going to discuss extensively, is if you scroll up a little bit, you're going to see the cuneiform. The cuneiform gives us, yeah, there you go, gives us a story into a Urartian time period, okay?
Good.
Now, this cuneiform, I want to be super clear about this point. Remember this. This cuneiform at Cavuştepe and the cuneiform at Ayanis in the entrance is the most significant piece of evidence that mainstream archaeology is using to date who built these and when. That's it. It's the cuneiform. Over and over and over again. All it says in the inscription, well, it was built during so-and-so's reign in the Urartian time period, whether or not it's Rusa II or other various kings. That is this very steadfast paradigm that is so hard to erode. I'll come at it from different angles. What about seeing vitrification? What about the stonework comparisons with the Iron Age? All of these things, I can't touch it. But we found something. We found something at Ayanis, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted to lay that out because that is what is being used to state that when these were built. Now, super clearly, let's go over this. Scroll down for me to the other photograph. Well, it looks like a massive recycling reuse situation occurred here, in which there was some kind of catastrophe that may have partially exploded this temple. And I mean exploded, and because we found evidence of that may have happened. Some kind of an overload of energy. And of course, that gets into the whole definition of what these temples were functioning as. Now, if you could go back to that other photograph with Robert Schoch now. This is your evidence that for at least not the cuneiform, but for the fact that the structures were from different ages. And let me tell you why. At this upper, right above where we were, you have to hike up a steep mountain. And on top of it is another Susi temple. They're called Susi temples, S-U-S-I. It's the shape and design that you saw below. Well, the one up above only has limestone. There's no basalt in it anywhere, except for the fact that if you walk around the perimeter, you find somewhere between maybe 20 to 50 of these fragments of basalt that have the same stonework, same quality, everything as down below. But they're all broken. None of them are larger than about the piece that I'm holding in my hand.
I see.
And they all have severe damage to them, scattered in this nature around the periphery of it. And then meanwhile, the Susi temple is built in limestone. That, to me, Will, tells us that the original two Susi temples were basalt, and that a catastrophe obliterated the upper one, obliterated it. And then the lower one still had sections intact, and then they rebuilt it. But it really fundamentally shifts and changes our understanding of the timeline here.
Yeah. And it reminds me a whole lot. I mean, you will know better than I, and I'm going to save some of my Egyptian questions for after, once we've gotten done with all the new things happening over there. But it reminds me of some of the issues with the pyramids. I mean, we have some pyramids built to extreme, excellent, just perfection. I've been there, and of course, anybody who's never been to Giza and seen the Great Pyramids and seen these things, you have no idea what you're really looking at in your little history textbook or through a video or anything until you show up at there and look at the Sphinx and look at these, and then you truly get a real understanding. You're like, yeah, your mind is blown. There's no way to convey how ridiculous these things truly are. But the reason I bring that up is because then when you go and look at some of the later quote unquote Egyptian potentially pyramids, the the quality is not the same. There's difference in quality, and you can see that there's the difference in quality of some pyramid depending on the time of which at least we try to date them, which clearly has to show either there's either a civilization that knew, like it would be ridiculous right now. We don't truly, when we build monuments, we don't just build them with 16th century, understanding of engineering. We build them in the way that we build these ridiculous 21st century buildings. And so, just like you're saying right now, I mean, it goes to say, all right, well, what is the real story? Like, why would you use limestone in what looks like shoddy, limestone compared to what's here, this basalt that looks, you know, incredible? And so it tells us that there has to be another story. It doesn't make sense. So that's really interesting. And I'm curious also, because I think where we're headed now next is Ayanis and the cuneiform there, some of the stuff that you found. Can we throw that up?
Yeah. Um, so Ionis is the most sacred of all sites to me. This is Professor Ishikli. He is the head excavator of the site. And I want to say a special thanks to everything that he allowed us to do. We are the first ones in history to film Ionis, to film the Haldi Temple of Ionis. It's never happened before. And so I feel a great honor that we were allowed to show such a sacred, important place to the world. And so there we are, him and I on either side of the sacred altar, just for that nice pivotal historic moment of doing that. Because I think when this narrative shifts in the future, and I know it will, I mean, it's not a question. When it does, and we start to collaborate even to a greater degree of uncovering the true mysteries of these sites, Ionis will be a place that is, I think, one of the most holy in the world in the future. A place of pilgrimage and a place of wonder and a place of uncovering great, great aspects of our story and who we are, uniting every aspect of pre-religion, religion, spirituality, ancient history, architecture, timelines, all in one place to a location that something truly profound, something magical happened here. And all the symbols tell us that, and showing this altar that used to be, you can see the back wall where it used to connect with it, creating a synergy between, again, the masculine basalt pillars around it with the beautiful feminine andesite stonework inside, and then creating this fusion of energy. I think what Ionis does, far beyond even just the spiritual religious timeline side of our history, is gives us a deep glimpse into sacred geometry, architecture, and how it can create certain synergies in certain fields that we don't fully understand yet.
Can you speculate? Because I mean, yeah, the imagery is incredible, and I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about this in one of our other podcasts, but could you could you speculate at all on what these religious practices like? Do we know anything at all about what the altar and
We
what
know
they're
we know a
doing?
lot.
Okay,
We know a lot, actually. It's been
yeah,
2 years, and
awesome.
this is my 3rd time at Ionis, so I've
Mhm.
been back a number of times. Every time we get a glimpse into something different. The first thing is that what you need to understand is what all of the symbols are. So first you need to see them all. So you take the altar, you get the representation of every single one on the altar, right? Okay. Does that have a relationship with the other symbols in the wall? Do those symbols altogether have any relationship to other sites?
Mm.
Right? Is there a connection between all of them? What you do is you work backwards.
Uh-huh.
Just as George Smith cracked the Sumerian code of a dead language, the only way to uncover something that's been lost is to work backwards. And that's exactly what we have to do. In order to understand what's here, we have to use the understanding of not only every site around Lake Vaughan, but even the connections to other parts of the world.
Right.
Why do we have such similar symbols at Ionis and Kef and Cavuştepe as across the world in Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia? Why do we have the same or very similar motif symbols then carried over in Peru, in places like Ollantaytambo? How? Why? Why do we have a very similar symbol at Kef, a fundamental step pyramid design that we see as a core of what became the Chicana in South America? Why is that same symbol above an ancient temple in Cambodia? Over and over again, these things are pointing towards a global understanding, a lost connection. That's why we're calling it the missing key back to nearly everything. The core of every esoteric teaching, every part of mysticism, every aspect of these ancient civilizations and what they held most dear to them seems to all come back to an origin point that I believe firmly is Lake Fawn,
Wow.
a place where the genesis potentially of these symbols and the divine knowledge that is associated with them was first lowered here for a very specific purpose. And when the more I dig into them, the more they amaze me, the more they blow my mind. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Is on the altar, there are two symbols that are repeating over and over and over again. And they're all being shown in a honeycomb-like design by three different guardian forces that are protecting them. Okay? Those guardian symbols are on the back wall here, carved into the stone at Ayanis, and they're also on the altar. So all of a sudden, boom, there you have your relationship, and you start looking at it deeper. What's fascinating to me is that the concepts that I'm seeing displayed here, I'm reading about in the highest levels of esoteric teachings in Hermeticism. In Hermeticism. So in ancient Hermeticism, again, Hermes, right, the Greek god of knowledge and wisdom, he is to me is just an extension of Thoth in Egypt and everything that's between. And we see this relationship with Haldi, which has the wings right in front of you, in front of the solar cross, the origin sacred cross there. And they all have relationships and connections to each other. So does Vishnu in the Hindu gods seems to have a direct correlation connection with Haldi, whereas Viracocha in South America with Bolivia seems to also be the equivalent. But it goes deeper even into the Trimurti concept of Hinduism with these three core concepts. Like the center concept of Brahma, right, the breath of God, seems to be the core. It's emanating here through the tree of life on the Kaf bas-relief. And then what we see with Vishnu, this creator god of preservation and knowledge, seems to be the exact equivalent of Haldi. But then on the other side, we see the other equivalent with what's called Toshiba to this culture, who is the representation of Shiva in Hinduism. Three triads of gods that represent the fundamental balance, creation, and harmony of the entire universe. And we find that here, echoed in all of these sites. But not only that, we see other fundamental constants that are even profound. Like, for instance, one of the cores of Hermeticism is that Hermes states in this beautiful moment, this passage, he's talking to Poimander, the great dragon of the universe god. And yes, in that sense, source or God is represented by a great dragon. I want people to remember that and take it out of a physical mindset and then look at places like Teotihuacan and look at places like Chichen Itza, look at Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl. Maybe that'll make a lot more sense after you start understanding that. But anyway, in this depiction, Hermes is trying to understand the greatest knowledge of the universe, the greatest questions, right? Revealing the greatest answers to the universe. And he asks him that question. He says, "Oh, great dragon, could you, tell me the wonders and an understanding of the nature of man and the nature of God?" You know what he says to him? He says, "Oh, Hermes, in order for mankind to understand," and I'm paraphrasing here, "in order for mankind to understand the nature of who we are and the nature of what God is one and the same. It is known through a concept of light and life, and that those are the two core principles that make up the nature of God and make up the nature of us. And what are the two exact symbols repeating over and over again on the altar that are being guarded and protected? It is light and life, being shown over and over again on that through the concept of a holy flame, the flame like we see that's been protected throughout religion, but then also the symbol of life through three little pieces of like basically leaves, like flowers growing out of a circle. And so we have those two concepts that are echoing over and over again. When I read that, Will, I'm like, so what is going on here? Are we looking at the origins of all esoteric knowledge? Is there something where it had its genesis that then spread around the world? Is that why we then see so many temples and pyramids with so many similarities, the same stonework, the same concepts echoed, and the fact that there's no writing in any of them?
Right.
And that's the most wild thing. The Great Pyramids of Giza, there's no writings in any of them. All these structures at Pumapunku and Teotihuacan and throughout Peru, there's no writings. Go all the way to Cambodia. There's no writings. You go here in this site, and if you take the cuneiform and you take it out of the equation, you realize that maybe this civilization left no writings behind because language wasn't even a thing for them. Maybe
Yeah.
their language was symbolism and deep esoteric meanings. And we can get into that cuneiform in a second here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that is the great mystery, right? This is one of the great things that all people like yourself have been trying to discover. And the funny thing about it is without having a true understanding of all of this, that makes more sense than we had of a fractured world, in which case all of these people, independent of each other, discovered the same thing and have the same importance, and it becomes the Trinity, the understanding of this esoteric knowledge. It's all the same. Then pyramids and all the same. All of them did it separately. Everyone. There's three of them. That it doesn't make any sense. Or it would make more logical sense. It's a more simple understanding that there was a connection and that it dispersed. That something held everything together at some point, and then something happened to fracture this understanding, and that's where it's scattered and left out there. It doesn't make any sense to me to just think I'm going to leave open the possibility that that could be true, but it really doesn't make much sense to me. What are these cuneiforms that you're pointing out? What did you hit us up on this next slide? What is this?
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into this.
All
So
right.
this was the most important thing that came out of the entire expedition. And I
Uh-huh.
want to lay this out because I think it's extremely significant. Now, again, I mentioned dating of like Mount Nemrut and the underwater lake. Hopefully we can find enough dating to accurately prove that through sediment cores and different things. But you look at all of it, right? Vitrification, other things we found, evidence of stonework, similar symbols. It doesn't get to the heart of disproving what we need to.
Yeah.
What we need to understand, and what I deeply knew in my heart and through my research and through what the evidence was that the cuneiform that is present at both Cavuştepe, and this is the entryway to Ayanis, so the most holy of holies. When you enter the three pillars, right, on the outside and you walk in, the cuneiform is on the entranceway to this, okay? Now, what I was looking for, and I was like, I knew there had to be a piece of evidence to prove it. To disprove that the cuneiform was not written when the structure was built. That is the number one thing that archaeologists, getting back to it, are using to date everything. And it describes how Rusa II, a later Urartian king, came and built all of these things and adorned them, and he was a sacred place and all that. That's essentially what it says. And I will also point out that most of the Urartian language, by the way, cuneiform is not a language, it's a writing style. This is what's called Urartian, and they don't fully know a lot of the words still. It's actually, even that understanding is somewhat unknown. But
Right.
that doesn't really matter here because you know the name Rusa II. We have all those things established. And so I'm there and I'm saying to myself, there's got to be evidence that the cuneiform was put in after, because nothing else makes sense. Every single thing, truth always connects. If you're trying to find truth, just look for what fits. They're like puzzle pieces. They're
Right.
made to be that way. And so I knew there had to be evidence that the cuneiform was not part of the original design. And here we found two spots. So there's two images I want to show. Let's start with this one, and then there's another one that's right next to it. But essentially what we're pointing at is, imagine you have this entryway into Ayanis, and you have evenly spaced cuneiform like a book. So if Will John is writing in a book, what is he going to do? Well, he's going to write to the end of that page, then he's going to start right below it and keep writing. That's how we write. He's not going to write and then stop halfway through that line and then continue underneath it unless he's starting a new chapter or whatever it is. What I'm
Right.
saying is that all of the cuneiform is consistent on a line. You can see the lines they actually drew across all of it, except for several very specific areas. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is what is called pitting or weathering. Now, it means that the mineral composition of this is called andesite, which is an extremely hard stone. It's an igneous stone. Very hard to move, very hard to shape, very hard to cut. It means that damage on it occurred at a point far before the cuneiform was ever in the stone. And let me tell you why we know that. First of all, notice how the writing goes around it in every case. And can you go to the next image too, just while I'm making this point? You'll see it. Yes, thank you. This is a great example. This is even better because I want you to see how consistent the cuneiform is laid across the blocks, okay? Now look at where the damage is and look at how it's the only areas that they went around those places and didn't write through them. Why? Well, the masons of the Urartians would have very well known that, number one, this is a very sacred place. If you put wedges through that, you will break the stone. You literally, what you will get is a shelling off of the outer surface that will fracture the entire stone. Okay, it will break it. And so what do you see here? You see very clear indication that they had to go around consciously damage in the blocks. Now let's lay this out for a minute. If the Urartians, let's play with some thought here. If the Urartians built this and 2,100 years ago, 2650, whatever it was, and they had the capability to cut these beautiful andesite that we have no idea where they came from, huge distances away. It's not local. There's no local andesite or basalt on this site. It's limestone again, very similar to Cavuştepe. If they had the capability to cut, move these stones, work with them to the level we're seeing of this quality, why in any way, Will, would they have deliberately left a damaged block in the entranceway and then wrote around it? Not only that, why wouldn't they just turn the block before they even wrote it?
Right.
Why wouldn't they cut a new block and put it there? It doesn't make any sense except for one thing, that they came later, found an ancient temple that predated them by deep antiquity, and they adopted it like we see in Egypt with the dynastic Egyptians, did extremely good cuneiform. I will give them credit for that. They were very respectful, but there was pre-existing pitting and weathering in the andesite from a mineral composition deformation, we'll call it, on the surface that over time, and I'm not saying though that weathering was there originally. I don't think it was. In fact, they were probably beautiful blocks that were perfect. And as that temple sat for thousands of years, rain and snow or buried or whatever it was, huge amounts of even sun damage, maybe CME damage, and I can get into that with you and show you in a second.
Okay.
That whatever those series of events were over great amounts of time caused this pitting due to weathering. Weathering is the outcome of the pitting. It's what caused it. So you would say the pitting is caused by weathering over time. And so that gives us a chronology that completely, in my opinion, separates the ages of when these were built, basically blowing this entire thing open with everything else that we've found. What are your thoughts on that, Will? I think you're very intelligent. I would love to know your feedback.
I mean, listen, that's what makes sense because it doesn't have, there's no reason, obviously, like you said, to, if it wasn't there, here's where my thinking is going. If it wasn't there before, if it was them that's making it, what is the point of leaving all of this stuff? It looks weird. It doesn't make any sense for it to be there. And so I'm guessing you're probably right that this was here, and we have a number of cases of this as civilizations go and disappear, and the people come on, and then we incorporate them into we do it all the time now with temples. There's I was just in Istanbul, Turkey. There's you've got the Hagia Sophia, for instance. That thing is old. I don't know. Let's say 1,500 years. It was Orthodox Christian. It's been Muslim. It's been this, and inside and inscriptions and things have changed since then, right? And if all of a sudden we disappeared, you're going to see writing on top of this that it's going to have nothing to do with the origins of the site, right? I think it was Justinian that created that, and there's all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with him as well, all up inside there, And so I would say that makes sense. It seems logical, right? And especially when you look across this entire all the cuneiform that's here and all these stones, they didn't have any problems with virtually any of the others, but this was here, and you can't move it. That's the thing. You cannot move this and just be like, all right, let's just replace this stone. I mean, you would if it was the beginning, right? But you can't. Now it's impossible. So yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, and I want to add another point to that. I really like what you just said. When we were looking at the T-pillars at Cavuştepe, those huge, beautiful T-pillars, I'm sure a lot of people have seen them, I've showed them. We found out, and we were shown a photograph from the head archaeologist at his name was Dr. Raffet. wonderful. He actually was in the documentary. He gave us a wonderful tour. He showed us an image of one of the T-pillars that had been recycled into a church and had been recarved into above a doorway very differently than it had originally been, the state it was in. And I'm thinking to myself, then why are we so unable to accept that that could have happened elsewhere in other ways? It's really frustrating to me at times, but I understand that it's part of a paradigm that has been built by the collective understanding of everyone that's come before them. And once
Right.
that collective understanding shifts even to the smallest level, it's like a dam basically opening up. And you can't close that back up again. Once that river starts flowing and that new understanding happens, it's going to open up the doorways to not only that these are pre-Urartian sites in their origin and come from a deep time of antiquity, but then how many other questions is it going to open up around the world? What are we
Yeah.
going to start talking about with Egypt, with Baalbek, Lebanon, with Yangshan Korea, China, with the Imperial Palace of Tokyo, Japan, with Pumapunku in Bolivia, with Ollantaytambo and around the Coricancha in Peru, and many, many others? You know, like, what is this going to open for a worldwide discussion of understanding recycling and reuse? Because here's the truth, Will. The Inca only were around 400 years.
Yeah.
400 years. And the Urartians were around like 3 to 400 years. How could they possibly have done anything like this?
Right.
It's not enough time. It's not enough time to master masonry and create a rich cultural environment in which you have the kind of abilities to even do this. It's much easier to adopt something older and incorporate it into your culture and pretend that you're the ones who built it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's incredible too as well because, how long was the Egyptian, dynasty? Were we 4,000, 6,000 years roughly? What do we
Yeah,
date
yeah,
from?
yeah. It's somewhere like around 5,000 years ago to
Right?
4,000. Yeah.
And we have questions on how they're able to do they had the time, right? And we look at our right now we live in the world where the dominant, power is whatever, 1776, right? A few hundred years. And, yes, we've created all sorts of stuff, but you're nothing compared to some of these. We have questions on, all the great things that the Egyptians have done. We've been around for a small amount of time. We think that our understanding of the nature of reality is so advanced because of what we've done, and it's truly not. And all you have to do is calculate out and say, let's just assume there's some level of stability within the world that we have now, and the dominant powers stay the dominant powers, Russia, China, USA, whatever it is, and USA maintains its level of dominance. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this time period is going to look? 4,000 years of advancements compare it's going to be ridiculous, right? And then all of a sudden 4,000 years and then poof, it disappears and here comes somebody, with a couple hundred years and they just want to chisel some stuff on here. That is so logical. That's so it's yeah, I just put will yeah, I'll just put my name on, whatever's standing. I mean, not to mention our stuff is not going to stand that long should we disappear. It's not built in this andesite. It's not built in these stones. It's going to wipe away much before that. It's not going to last these tens of thousands of years. But, yeah, I find it incredible that we can't open that up. But I think it's exactly what you said. We're going to have a hard time with this paradigm. It's what we have for whatever reason. This is what is staying, and there's a very fixed mentality on this. I think you are doing a great job. There are other people doing some great research into kind of cracking this in order to get us to start asking those questions and making it okay even to question it. But the biggest issue is because that paradigm has to stay together, because if it doesn't, we got a lot of questions to answer about us and about civilizations. We got a lot of stuff
It's
to talk
truly
about.
Pandora's box, isn't it?
It's I think too much, and that's one of the reasons. But you went from here to Mount Supon. Was that is that after
Well,
this or
so right outside, I just want to mention one more thing. I don't know if there's another
sure?
image you can pull up just in this temple, but what we found in conjunction, yeah, go the other way. What we found in conjunction was also something else quite startling, and I wanted to bring it up and point it out. Is that the floors? Go back to a photograph of just sort of like the temple. Keep going, keep going. I think there's some good ones. Yeah, right there. That's good. That's good. That's fine. So what's beautiful is that the floor is actually not andesite. It might surprise you. It is the altar and the floors are made out of what's called golden calcite alabaster. It is magical when you walk in there. Well, every single person on that trip, you enter in there and you walk in there, of course, always with bare feet, and it is sacred. It is people Robert Edward Grant, and I won't speak for him, but there were other people in the group and other people involved that had some of their most profound experiences of their life.
Mm.
Some people cried. Some
Mhm.
people were overwhelmed in how powerful it was in there. And reason I'm saying that is that not only the sacred nature of this space and how we seem to somehow remember and feel it when we go in it, but the stones and the things they built it with creates that kind of resonance field. So what I
Mm.
was trying to get at is that on the floor, on the ground, the floor is made of this golden calcite alabaster, like this thick. They're beautiful. It's like glows yellow. Okay, it's like the most beautiful floor you've ever seen,
Mhm.
and it's ancient. You walk in though, and the entire entryway. I'm building up to something here. The entire entryway where the light would come in, so basically facing where Paul is, it comes across the middle of the floor and it hits the altar. You can draw a line out of where the altar is, where the width is, towards the doorway, and see the damage that's occurred to that calcite alabaster. What it did is it caused the altar and all the floor in front of it up to the doorway to turn into a milky white.
Mm.
Milky white. And Dr. Robert Schock was in there. And I'm like, Robert, what kind of heat could have caused this alabaster to reform into like a really milky white color? And he's like, had to have been some pretty extreme heat. Now, not to the level of necessarily of vitrification on basalt of like 2,000 degrees, but we're talking about something that's an enormous temperature. I won't put a measurement on
Oh,
that
okay.
yet because I don't know if we have enough data to say what kind of temperature could cause that to turn milky like that. But the
Uh-huh.
altar itself was completely broken and broken into sections and pieces, and it used to fit into the wall. So whatever happened there makes me think and wonder if the pitting and weathering on the blocks is also a result of whatever that event was. And so that's why I wanted to lay that out, is that we see
Wow.
catastrophe damage in
Okay.
this temple in deep antiquity, that something happened.
Right. And obviously, yeah, are you saying that because you don't have data on the heat source, you can't say what that catastrophe is? Or you have
Well,
some guess?
it comes from the direction of the sun. Now, if it was a fire, it would have been more uniform throughout the whole structure. But because it's only in the area where the sun would illuminate and come through, I measured it. So I was measuring the sun angle and the width of basically where the cone of the sun would come in, and it matches the parameters of that all the way to the altar, which makes me strongly think that it was CME heat related from the sun, like a
Oh,
coronal mass ejection type of
wow.
event, which of course we're seeing evidence for all around the world. But that lends me to believe that an event like that may have been what destroyed and wiped out this culture that built this.
Wow. What would that look like as far as devastation? Like, is that a
Well, it
quick
wouldn't even been in just one event. Remember the
Okay.
Mount Nemrut explosion as well
Right.
nearby. We're looking at a combination of different events that are basically
Mhm.
like end of the world type of events.
Mm.
If you were at Ayanis during that, you would have been likely vaporized as a human.
Wow.
We're
Okay.
talking about extreme temperatures that are probably somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees. These environments of melting on the stone, like we see at 𝗃𝗪𝗟 on the basalt, where Dr. Robert Schock, and we'll have maybe some photographs of that, I can at least describe it, is that we have confirmed 100% that the glass-like surface on the bas-relief that was broken at Kef was in fact vitrification from a coronal mass ejection from the
Wow.
sun. So we know that that evidence is in this area, and we know that that was one of the considerations, but also we don't want to underestimate the fact that there are fault lines literally underneath the ground, right in this area, under the lake, under the ground. In fact, one of the saddest things of all, and I don't know if people know this, but I think it's important to mention, is that if you look at the Haldey Temple of Ayanis when it was first discovered in 1997 up through the early 2000s, you will probably cry because you'll see that unfortunately an earthquake, because we uncovered everything and it was that then open, because remember it was buried before. It was buried under in mountains of cuneiform, adobe mud brick that had collapsed and potentially buried sediments. It was like a tomb. It was like encased in it and protected. When they uncovered and took everything out and exposed it, there was unfortunately an extremely bad earthquake in 2011 in that region, in which broke additionally very bad parts of the altar and if you look at that back cross, the central cross, it broke that
Mhm.
entire piece that's right
Okay.
above it. And Sheikley and I, Professor Sheikley and I were trying to put it back together. It needs to be glued and taking very carefully. What I'm
Right.
trying to say is, how sad is that? That this
Wow.
structure could survive for thousands of years, eons potentially, right, through time, and only to be uncovered by us and then have an earthquake in recent times do more damage than anything else that could have come
Wow.
before.
Yeah. I mean, it's already though, it's an unbelievable testament. I mean, as you see the images there, it's unreal actually. And I totally can imagine the vibe and like once you're walking into places like this. I mean, because the only other I mean, I've traveled around the world quite a bit. I don't know how many countries exactly that I've been to, and I've been to some of these sites as we've talked about uh before, and you're always floored once you're there. And so I know the feeling that you're describing for some of the people that walk into a place like this, especially when it's just a few of you guys. This is not necessarily a tour. It's tough to get to these places, correct? I mean, this is not like sitting
These
right.
are not open to the public.
Yeah. Okay.
Ionis is guarded 24/7 by a gate with a guard down below. So no,
Yeah.
they're protected very well because they need to be.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I know what it's like to walk into some of these places that you just really cannot just walk up to on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, it floors me the feelings that you get off of these places, the energy you feel off of these places. I wish I could convey this to everybody who's who's watching this. I mean, you really cannot understand until you go. And so, I mean, it's great also for your work that you're actually going there. Uh, where did you want to take us after this?
Sure, yeah, we can conclude, I guess, with 𝗪𝗪𝗟𝗡 and just go over a couple things, but and that's the next pictures after this.
Mhm.
So so many things came out of this, so many understandings of different dating, and that's how we ended the documentary. We had the most beautiful sunset. That's called Mount Supon. It's a 13,000-foot volcano in the distance that was very sacred to them. And if you draw a line, literally from that sunbeam, so if we were to draw a line from that sunbeam, 𝗪𝗪𝗟𝗡 is basically underneath that sunbeam to the left of Mount Supon. So they're actually have close relationships. So it's perfect for us to go and end at 𝗪𝗪𝗟𝗡 for this. So yeah, if you can go to the next image for me, we can keep going. That's the altar. These are the amazing symbols in the altar. There you go. Now, these are the type of basalt pillar designs that are surrounding Ionis, exactly the same. So we
Mhm.
know there's a deep relationship between both sites, and they function as like a circuit board almost, I believe. Really interesting because of the extensions in the stones that stick out only on each corner, and it has this uniform look. And by the way, it's three. You see that 333? You see
Yep.
369 is basically a motif over and over and over again on every one of these places. Now, what you're seeing right now has basically never been shown before because this is just been uncovered by archaeologists yet last year. And we were brought in. You can still see the dirt that's on the bottom part of it, is that this was an intact pillar structure where, as opposed to the other ones nearby, had to be actually re-put back together in some cases with a crane, right? So not by hand, we had to use a crane to put them back together and lift them. That's how heavy they are. I say we, I mean modern humanity. But
Yeah.
this is a brand new one that has just been uncovered, and we were very lucky enough to both be part of the excavation of that, as well as to be in this and be able to show these to the world. These structures are mysterious, Will. They have a very specific type of uh, magnetic composition based on their basalt. And there's very interesting aspects of how they picked this type of basalt and versus the bas reliefs, the huge squares that have all the inscriptions I've shown you that came from here. The fact that they picked different kinds of basalt to carve those and had reasoning on why is mind blowing. Imagine that basalt you see right there has been identified by archaeologists as the crow flies 7 kilometers or 10 kilometers walking one way over mountains to the flanks of Mount Supon where that sunset, where they got the basalt and cut it. How did they move it? Why would they go up there and get that when they could just use limestone that's
Right.
native to the mountain? Why did they go up there and get the basalt? Why did they then target another type of fine grained basalt for the bas reliefs, but then use coarse grained basalt for the pillar? Why? Why would they go to enormous lengths to find these specific mineral composition stones and build them only with this and ignore all of the local stone? And I mean, it gets even deeper. I mean, imagine you have the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is primarily, in the inner sanctum of above the king's chamber is beautiful hewn granite, right? So gorgeous granite blocks, but granite's not on the outside. Limestone is on the outside. Why? Because limestone's an insulator.
Hmm.
So it then shows you that maybe all of this is very much on purpose, is that these
Right.
mountains they built this on, they're limestone. So they built basalt on top of it, and andesite, some kind of a resonance field, potentially, some kind of a reaction with the sun, the movements of all these things, the interactions of them. It's mysterious. But I can tell you one thing, that this day that we were here, the governor, or sorry, I should say the mayor of Ejijivez, the town right below us, beautiful place, known for their walnuts and other things and apricots, he came up with his whole entourage of cameras and supported our notion of an earlier civilization that may be older than Göbekli Tepe. And so we are now in a collaboration with even some of the municipal government. Of course, the head archaeologist joined us, and it's completely fine, and I respect the fact that they don't share that same understanding. But what's beautiful is that we can work together, that they're part of the documentary. They can lay out their perspectives of Urartian history, and we can all come together and be like, let's work together like science was supposed to be all along. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think given that there is, and I guess I should ask before I even say what I was going to say, then what is their opposing viewpoint to you? They
That it's
don't,
just Urartian.
it's just
That it's
your
just
art. That's it.
2,800 years ago Urartian. Yeah.
Period. They just, and they don't, did you bring up any of your understandings, findings? How do they knock them down?
Just allow things to happen naturally. This wasn't a position where we were made to go back and forth right now on this. I was just very grateful to have them be a part of the documentary and giving us
Sure.
such wonderful access and collaboration in these
Mm.
places. And I will say, I very much deeply respect the work that they're doing and everything that they bring. And so I wanted to show that honor and respect for their work. And the end of the day, just because I disagree based on evidence and data, that's the core of science. That's what
Sure.
objective science is that you come together to investigate what the truth is. You don't create a predetermined expectation. You investigate where the evidence goes. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And I want to point that out because you're seeing a lot of opposition, and I won't mention who they are, in other areas of trying to fight archaeologists and trying to get into like a pissing match, I will say. Okay. And what we're doing right now is we want the opposite. I am deeply honored to be working with these archaeologists. And even though we don't fully agree with our perceptions and perspectives, it doesn't matter because that's what science is. In the end of the day, as long as we're honorable and respectful, we can all come together and investigate whatever the truth is and follow the evidence.
Which has reminded me, especially if you guys are watching this now and enjoying this, you'll enjoy a discussion that Matt and I had, that we hosted with John F. White, who is a brilliant, I think, way of putting together two worlds that are very different but still the same in many ways. So we'll link to that also. We've definitely got to do some more there. But what are we looking at now?
So these are just the freshly uncovered. Just last year, they uncovered the pillars here. We were not even allowed to take photographs of this last year when we went in. And so it was so wonderful to see. Can you go back one image to the left? It was really wonderful to see all of these structures in situ, meaning like where they originally were. And I want to talk about this, though, in particular.
Mhm.
What you have in front of you is a fractured, broken bas relief. Can you go back one more to the left? Yeah, thank you. This is a giant one, which you see in Ankara Museum. I've showed a million times in my reviews with you and going over it. But there are actually 7 of these down in a storeroom museum right below this mountain in Ejijivez. And we were able to film in there also. Unbelievable for the first time that they allowed us to do that, to see them in their form and down there. But why am I saying that? Well, it wasn't until that we went down and saw those down there and how damaged they were. Unfortunately, in 1964, the practices they had were not what they have now, and bulldozers severely damaged them in
Wow.
moving them. However, in seeing how damaged they were in their dimensions, it made us realize that this one and then the other one that is to the right photograph are bas-reliefs. However, all of the sides of them have broken off. And so what you have is a beautiful smooth surface cut right on top, which is evidence of what it once was, but all the pieces broke off. And so what did we do, Will? Well, I was like, oh my God, that means that any fine-grained basalt anywhere is part of the bas-relief. Again, I'm like in ultra nerd mode because the blocks above are coarse basalt. There's no basalt on the mountain, nothing native. We
Right.
had to go get it great distances, okay? So we know that the coarse basalt is part of the blocks above. The fine grain is only in these bas-reliefs. And so what we're doing, and we got it live on camera, okay, live, and it was beautiful to have that moment happen, was searching the perimeter of this, and then can you go to the image to the right after now? Yeah, now you can see the pillars still on that right in front of you if you look. So this is Martin Young, and there's the pillars still with the T's. It's upside down, it got flipped. So if you then go and we look at the bas-reliefs, you can see, oh my God, so this is part of that, right? Part of a broken sacred artifact. And so what did we do? We searched the entire perimeter of these for any fine-grained basalt, and we found one. We uncovered one. I turned it over on camera, and it has a whole pillar cut right into it. It's like, and of course we didn't take it. We put it back where it belonged. And anybody listening to this, they watch this place very closely to not go up there and try to take anything, because we are all watching it. But I just want to say is that there are real archaeological discoveries just waiting in places like this that have been less than 5% excavated, where there are sacred connections back to this entire story and narrative that just sitting right beneath the ground. And to find those and be a part of that was very, very powerful and moving experience. Like,
Right.
again, Martin is standing in front of a sacred artifact that had broken and only has one of the sides remaining to it. But so much came out of that. Again, I mentioned the vitrification on top of the other block that we were just looking at a minute ago, and all of the nature of how the symbols connect, and the fact that they're so broken and strewn and scattered shows utter catastrophes hit these sites, Will. Utter catastrophes, just like Ayanis and Cavuştepe, right? Remember, we're showing the Susi temple maybe had blown up, and then Ayanis has got this pitting and weathering, and the melting and basically milking of turning milky of this alabaster stone. And then here we're seeing these blocks. If you want to get an understanding, go back one picture for me really quick. That block, Will, weighs somewhere around 30 tons. 30 tons. Okay. If we were to imagine a ton is 2,000 pounds, do the math.
Right.
How could they possibly have moved these and cut and worked with them? If anything, it looks like the remnants of a truly deep antiquity civilization that did things that we don't understand that just blow our minds. It really has a lot of parallels to places like Giza, places like 𝗵𝗡𝗄, places like in Peru, where these structures and things they built, they go beyond any comprehension we have of ancient engineering and even current engineering, not using machinery. And it truly opens up the doors to what is our story? How far back does our story go? And who are we? Who were we once? Can we become that again?
Right. Yeah. And, it's funny because you mentioned the ways and means that they were using. You mentioned 1964 and some of the other discoveries, which of course even happened before then, where they may have damaged, some things with the bulldozer or whatever they're going through. And it just reminds me, are you saddened? This is a ridiculous question, but are you saddened that you're now living in and that you're now a researcher in the world where we respect ancient sites and where you can't just take some dynamite and just blow things up like they were doing in 1800s, the 1700s, in order to make a new discovery, where they'll just be like, we found a tomb, and they just hack it open and do that. We did discover stuff like that. We wouldn't have some of the actual
And
understandings.
it's through treasure pillaging, though.
Right. Right. Yeah. And yes. And so many of those times, those people were taking things. I mean, obviously, there's been all sorts of stuff even before, these modern times of grave hunters and treasure hunters within those types of places. But now I'm basically going to the spot of, because you're so respectful with the site and because you care and you're truly there. How are you going to make these new discoveries as well? I mean, there's tons to be uncovered. Now you're working with the municipality there. Is there plans to then go back and dig underneath? Like you
Yes.
guys went underwater, so like you got to keep going. How does that work?
Yeah. So I always tell people the same thing. The scouting trips, the documentary, they're just phases. They're
Mm,
phases of something much greater. This is not the end, it's just the beginning. We have so much more that we're going to be doing. Now that we have such good relationships, and I so much appreciate those relationships with all of the head excavators of these sites and a lot of the people involved in the municipality aspect and all of those, even the Coast Guard that supported us on this dive. I want to just say, like, to me, what is going to come forward in this is a wonderful collaboration that I hope we can all utilize our skills and strengths in saying, look, I'm looking at something that is very different than the adobe mud work and the limestone. That's here. That's here, and that's interesting in its own way. But what I'm interested in is anything that's andesite, basalt, even the types of quartzite we saw in one example at Cavuştepe. These very unique types of stones. Oh, and of course, the golden calcite alabaster.
sure.
These very unique stones that they only were picking. And there was the signature of their civilization. And so when I walk around these sites, whether or not it's Cavuştepe or 𝗃𝗪𝗟 or even Korzu or Ayanis or so many of these other sites, you'll see a beautifully cut piece of andesite or basalt just sticking out of the ground. And they're all over the place. And yet I say to myself, and I look at that and I say, that's evidence of a lost civilization. Someday in the future, those will be the things that we're looking for. Those will be the things that we're targeting. And that when I say that, because through phases in the future, I want to target knowing that, working with the archaeologists, saying, look at all this evidence here. Something's going on here. What's beneath the ground? Let's
Mhm.
do LiDAR. Let's do sonar scanning underneath Lake Vaughan and
Yeah.
other areas that we're identifying. Let's then go in and do active excavations targeting something a little bit more specific than we have before. But all working together to respect the sites, respect things that are found, having them be put in museums, having them be protected. And I just want a lifetime of that kind of collaboration, because imagine what could come out of that and what
Right.
could ripple out around the world. Imagine if every archaeologist was working with all the most passionate researchers in the world to uncover the truths of our story. What could we do together through collaboration rather than this competition?
Mhm. Well, I hope, because as a person who isn't directly involved in it, that would be much better for me rather than the contest slash gatekeeping slash paradigm sticking that we have now. And so I hope that you can convince them that it is in their best interest, in our best interest to do that. Um, Okay, well, good. Listen, you mean, you know me, I'm rooting for that as a person who's been on this journey and is always on these types of journey. And so, you also got a chance, and I think it's one of our last slides as well, to get some drone footage in the temple, in one of the temples. Did we get that? Or
Yes, we will. Well, again, we were the first ones to be able to film in the Holy Temple of Ionis, and we were able to get just beautiful scenes to really showcase that to the world. And so what we wanted to do is very carefully and very well planned, just so I might add, is making sure that um, we're obviously adhering to not causing any damage or any disruptions to the sites, but also showing them in the most beautiful way possible, because this was the unveiling to Ionis to the world.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and that's awesome. Jalen, can you go to the some of the other slides? I want to make sure that we see a little bit more. Keep going. I think this is past.
So we're measuring the proportions of those and how potentially exploring whether or not the bas reliefs actually sat on top of each one of these. That was what we were measuring in this to try to determine. And I feel like we found enough evidence to support that they did, at least from my perspective.
And so obviously, and I think did we mention that now on at the beginning? You're headed to where next? Just so we have an understanding.
So the next area we're going, and it's the last part of the filming, and I know it has been, talk about a process,
I
a
know.
year and a half, right?
Yeah.
5 countries. So we've done 4. We have 1 left. So the last country we will be doing is going to be Cambodia, and we will be going some very specific temples. So we're looking at something potentially pre-Khmer Empire. And
Okay.
that is something exciting, and I won't reveal what they are yet. I want some
Yeah.
mystery to remain in this, but
For
we are
sure.
finding evidence of pre-existing foundations and structures and symbols that seem to have carried around the world, and not just westward towards Peru, Bolivia, and other parts of like Greece and Egypt, but now eastward towards these sacred areas that we then saw very mysterious architectural designs from India all the way to Cambodia, Southeast Asia. Asia, very mysterious area. And so we have very profound connections to 3 specific temples, 3 within some of the, I won't say where they are yet, but they're within the complexes that people probably visit.
Right.
And they may be surprised that you may have even walked by them. But we're targeting and to connect that to show this lost connection to explore around the world. And Cambodia is the last place we will be filming, and then it will be a wrap. And then I essentially have to do a very significant amount of editing for a very long
Yeah.
time. I will be in the Philippines after for that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, we're talking about connections over the course of, I mean, thousands of miles. I mean, several thousands and thousands of miles. And I mean, if there is even a smidgen of connection, it's ridiculous just to think, that any sort of information connections or anything like that is happening at any of these time periods, because it's not necessarily how we like to think of things happening. So it's going to be incredible, obviously. One question now that we've kind of given some understanding of, your journey and where you're on. There have been, and I know you've seen this, and I know you're probably keeping up with this, even though it's not at the center point of what you're doing. A ton of discoveries underneath Egypt, underneath the pyramids in Egypt. It's obviously very much in the news. It was very much in the news when it came out, and it continues to be as some of the discoveries and things are being, let's say, put through the rigorous scientific process as other people come in and start to debunk it. Now, I'm sure you're well aware, and I'm obviously talking about some of the structures of the, I forget the name of the scientific.
Yeah, Armando May, I know him. I know him well.
Okay, so you know him great. Jalen, can you go ahead and find us some pictures of of the structures and
I'm
things that
happy to
they're.
give you my findings and feedback on that.
That's exactly what I'm looking for, because I
Sure,
knew once it
no
came
problem.
up, you know what, I didn't even bother. I said, "All right, I'll start here. I'll have my own questions, but it's great. I can just do it in real time and ask them that."
I would say the first place I would start is, should we be more careful to jump on things that we want to be true
Mhm.
just because of that? Now, let me lay out what I mean by that. Obviously, there are vast subterranean areas under the Giza Plateau. We know that. We know under the right paw, there is an entryway to an entire labyrinth that the Sphinx as a lion was guarding. We know that. We know it's a subterranean area that leads to libraries, leads to chambers underneath the Great Pyramid. So I want to start by saying 100% there are subterranean areas that remain still unknown that need to be explored underneath the Great Pyramids, without a doubt. Like, that is 100%. And that is part of what caused, I think, a little bit of this to occur, is that
Okay.
everybody was already under that mindset. Like, oh my God, we know that there are subterranean areas. We know that there are secrets in all of these underground worlds under Giza. Absolutely. We definitely know that. And we know that we need to explore them more. Where I have a problem, Will, is in some of the extreme accusations that are being put forth and some of the models. Now, let me tell
Okay.
you why I have a problem with them.
Yes, please
We got to
do.
get into a little bit of geology first. What do we
Okay.
know is underneath the Great Pyramids? Well, we know it's a limestone foundation base. Okay. And within that limestone foundation base, there are massive aquifer systems. In fact, that
Okay.
may have been one of the primary functioning aspects of the pyramids, was their relationship with the subterranean aquifer systems. in that kind of way, maybe conductivity, something to do with energy.
I
Now we
see.
see the same concept in Abydos, right? With the Osirion, same concept, subterranean aquifer systems being a part of these temples and these sites. So absolutely, that's a problem for this model. It's a bedrock base with a
Okay.
subterranean areas feeding up through it. How could you have cylinder-like objects or tunnels excavated to this kind of depth in that environment? If you were to do that, let me tell you what would happen. If you were to try to create one of these types of tunnels, cavities, you would instantly have it collapse and fill in with water because you're
Right.
looking at a super saturated subsurface limestone base bedrock of the Giza Plateau that there's a lot of water down there, actually, a lot. And flooding is one of the biggest problems in this. So how would you be able to create substructures like this underneath the pyramids, the second pyramid to be specific in this example, without causing structural integrity issues? Not only that, but if we're talking about the weight of that pyramid and you're creating that kind of discontinuous areas underneath, you could just be looking at an entire collapse of the subsurface with the pyramid collapsing in on itself
I see.
because of disturbing the structural integrity of the on the ground. One of my jobs I did for 2 years, I did a lot of soil and erosion control. That
Mm.
was actually my job. I'm an environmental science major before. That's what I did for a town. And so you can actually, if you destabilize certain banks, certain structures, certain features, you can collapse and have the entire thing basically fall apart. To me, these types of tunnel designs would be impossible with what we know of the bedrock, what we know of the subterranean water systems, and what we know of the integrity of the area. But what do I think it really could be? What do I think it really could be are a number of different shafts and different types of tunnels that connects to an interconnected web. But it's not like what they're trying to say are things that go down like half a kilometer or a
Yeah.
kilometer or
I think even
something.
more. Yeah. I've seen
Even
anywhere
more
from
than that, like that
yeah.
is to
Yeah.
me physically impossible.
Okay.
And that even goes up against like our understanding of like the ancients building what they did. But I think what is happening here is they're misreading these radar sonar readings, misreading them. What are they identifying underneath there? Maybe they're looking at some kind of an aquifer, natural geologic formations that have to do with underneath the pyramid. But that does not negate the fact that we need to explore the subterranean tunnels and chambers that exist underneath them.
Sure. Sure. Of course. Okay. Yeah. I find it fascinating. I mean, that's a place. I mean, obviously, having been there, like I said, it's incredible. I do wonder. I mean, I'm sure this is not the end of the road here. We're going to get. I don't know if there are any. Have you ever met the Mr. Famous Egyptologist? Is it Hawass? Well, I forget his
Z-
first name.
Zahi Hawass, I haven't met him in person yet, but he's just a gatekeeper of the
I,
paradigm. That's what he does. He's just a
yeah.
gatekeeper.
Okay, well, I try to understand this, guys, because I mean, way back when, of course, my interest in Egypt, of course, gets kicked off. It should, in all humans, your interest in Egypt should get kicked off as a kid. Once you see one picture of this place, you should be wondering what in God's name is going on. But he's an interesting enigma, and so I'm just trying to understand his role in this. I'm reading. There's another book called The Secret Chambers. I'm not sure. You definitely do know the author. Uh, Potentially, obviously, personally, I can't remember, but and he's quoted in there, and some of the quotes that he's saying just seem to be off. It seems as if, I'll put it this way, it seems as if he has a different motivation other than just trying to help us understand what's really going on. That's basically how I would put it. So I was curious if you had met
Zahi
him.
Hawass is very much a soldier in his
Okay.
position. It is a soldier that is adhering to a paradigm and a code, and whether or not he actually even believes in that is an entire other conversation itself,
Right.
which I have been privy to the fact that that may not be the case.
Uh-huh.
The point is that he is in a position of great power, and his responsibilities in that are to maintain the status quo, period. You see the same thing in other parts of the world as well, is that there are gatekeepers that are, and I've come across them before, that are very fierce in their protection of a certain the old paradigm, the consistent paradigm that has been around a long time. And those gatekeepers, though, are getting older, and those gatekeepers are going to pass away soon. And I don't wish that upon them. I just mean there will be a changing of mindsets and energy here. And in
Okay.
the future, those gatekeepers will not be allowed to exist. I can guarantee you that.
I
And
see.
I mean that in the way where their functionality in that place will not be allowed to exist in the environment that will be in the future. We all know
Mhm,
that.
mhm. Just final question, just to kind of throw that in to help my worldview and maybe the worldview of the viewers. The gatekeepers, in this sense, and then the ones that you've run into, are we talking about a collective organization that is trying to help keep a collective paradigm, or are they just separate people just trying to
I
keep
think that
together?
we're not looking at some group that meets in a dark room somewhere every night.
Right.
Okay, no.
Okay.
I'm not trying to suggest that in any means, but there is a power structure based on a hierarchy that exists
Okay.
within that has maintained and protect this. Okay, there
Uh-huh.
absolutely is. And there's reasons why people are put into power in the way that they are, because they will maintain that status quo, and that's why I call them soldiers, because
Sure.
that's their job, is just to maintain it. It's not their job to question or change the narrative. It's to maintain it for now. For now. For what was and what worked for us, but no longer serves us any longer. And that energy and that paradigm is shifting right now.
I
Especially the
see.
fact that we are working with so many top archaeologists in Turkey, you can clearly see that that tide is shifting, and that is already happening right now. And so
Okay.
for all the people that are pessimistic of the future, I am unbelievably optimistic as we enter into this new golden age. Everything is about to change. So buckle up, because it really is going to get exciting.
That is great. And we'll end it on that note. These discussions, it's always great because I always go back and then solidify my knowledge, and I see how far you've come and how far we've come in our understanding in just such a short period of time. And so I know you'll be eventually getting, you know, everything going with this project, the movie, the film, documentary, however it comes across. And I know it's going to be great, obviously. And I'm looking forward to helping everyone get a better understanding of the world through this. And so, I guess I should say, I mean, I know this will go up, and people will have all sorts of questions, and it'll be a good revelation for everybody there. But when you come back after, I mean, if you have the time after, Cambodia and everything, I'd love to kick it out, and as well, I'd love to just get your it's always been great for us and me to get your understanding of the world, and kind of it's been a while since we've done a true kind of pick Matt LaCroix's brain, you know? I'm sure you've changed quite a bit over the course. I know you have, actually. I've watched you, you
Always.
know?
Yeah.
And so I think it would be great for me and for everyone, and maybe even we'll take in some questions from the fans in the group, and just give it
Great.
a Matt LaCroix-a-thon. So yeah,
I would love
listen,
to do
thank
that well.
awesome. Uh, yeah, thanks for everything. We will link to all of the stuff that we already talked about here right down below, and Matt, we will do it again for sure.
Thanks so much, Will. I always love our conversations, and I look forward to having even more in-depth ones in the future. I appreciate it. Thank you.
100%. Guys, we'll link to everything. Go follow Matt, and we'll see you later.